Good morning. We want to welcome you that are here and those that are online to our morning edition of Thursday Church, where we are doing church differently but staying true to the message of Jesus Christ. And today, on part 5, we're going to talk about Down on the Farm series. We're going to talk about the wonderful world of sheep. Okay, now you may sound that sounds kind of funny to you. Excuse me while I adjust this. I wanted to share a few fun facts with you that I'm sure you didn't know about sheep. Number one is, contrary to popular belief, sheep are extremely intelligent animals capable of problem solving. They are considered to have a similar IQ to the level of a cattle and are nearly as clever as pigs. All right, number two, like various other species, including humans, sheep make different vocalizations to communicate different emotions. And they also display and recognize emotion by facial expressions. Now, number three, sheep are highly independent from birth, but at the same time, they like to be in a group together because there's safety in numbers. Did you know that the eyes of the sheep are placed on its head in such a way that they have a field of vision around 300 degrees? And this allows the sheep to see behind themselves without having to turn their head. Number 5, research in New Zealand has shown that the methane from the flagellants, or in other words, a sheep fart, has from one single sheep, it could power a small truck for 25 miles a day. Now, talking about being energy independent, I say line them up and let's fill up the gas tanks. In Scotland, the theft of a sheep is still a hangable offense. Imagine that. During the First World War, President Woodrow Wilson had a flock of sheep that he used to trim the lawn at the White House as a cost-cutting measure and to show support for the war effort. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I myself have often pondered what it would be like to have an edible lawnmower. There you go. Number 8, let's check this out. There are approximately 900 different species of sheep in the world. Who knew? All right. 1 pound of wool from a sheep, depending on the breed, can make up 10 miles of yarn, of wool yarn. So, depending on the breed and the sheep can produce between 2 and 30 pounds of wool a year. So let's take it to the extreme. So at 30 pounds, let's say the sheep is producing 30 pounds of wool, okay? We're going to multiply that by 10. That's 300 miles of wool yarn that comes from one sheep. Amazing. And then number 10, sheep have very good memories. They can remember at least 50 individual sheep and humans for years. Some fun facts you probably didn't know, probably don't care, but that's okay. We're still going to talk about sheep this morning. All right. Now, our Bible reading this morning comes from John chapter 10, verses 1 through 16, okay? And that's page 891 in your Bible there, in the chairs there. John chapter 10, verses 1 through 16, or page 891. Here we find Jesus speaking, and we're going to start with verse 1. I tell you the truth, anyone who sneaks over the wall of a sheepfold rather than going through the gate must surely be a thief and a robber. But the one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the door gate for him, and the sheep recognize his voice and come to him. And he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. After he has gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. Verse 5. Now, they won't follow a stranger. They will run away from him because they don't know his voice. Those who heard Jesus use this illustration didn't understand what he meant. So he explained it to them. I tell you the truth. Anytime that Jesus says, I tell you the truth, maybe your version may say, verily, verily, I say to you. But anytime that Jesus says, tell the truth, you want to perk up your ears and listen. He says, I am the gate for the sheep. Verse 8, all who come before me were thieves and robbers, but the true sheep didn't listen to them. Yes, I am the gate. Those who come through me will be saved. They will come and go freely and will find good pastures. The thief's purpose is to destroy and kill and steal, and my purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. Verse 11, I am the good shepherd. Again, Jesus speaking here. The good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. A hired hand will run when he sees a wolf coming. He will abandon the sheep, and because they don't belong to him, and he isn't their shepherd, and so the wolf attacks them and scatters the flock. The hired hand runs away because he's not working only for the money. He's only working for the money, and he really doesn't care about the sheep. Verse 14, I am the good shepherd. I know my own sheep, and they know me, just as my Father knows me, and I know the Father. So I sacrifice my life for the sheep. I have no other sheep. They are not. I have other sheep too. They are not in the sheepfold. I must bring them in also, and they will listen to my voice, and they will be one flock with one shepherd. And so after reading this passage of Scripture, after looking at it and studying it, the question that comes to my mind is, why is Jesus using sheep and a shepherd as an illustration for himself and people that are around him in that day? Now remember, you got to think back to the culture of that day, back a little over 2,000 years ago. They didn't have computers, they didn't have telephones, they didn't have mechanized motor vehicles or any electricity or anything like that. They did a lot of walking, and they did a lot of sheep herding and cattle herding and domesticated animals. And so the reason why Jesus here is using this illustration is because sheep and shepherding have been around since almost the beginning of time, okay, since Adam and Eve, after Adam and Eve, okay? And so the people of that day understood the relationship with the shepherd and the sheep. Okay, they understood that. They could grasp hold of that. Jesus was using a picture so that they could grasp hold. And that's what I want to do with you this morning. I want to paint this picture of what Jesus is trying to say. And now notice the verses 11 through 14, okay? Verse 11, here Jesus is saying, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. A hired hand will run when he sees a wolf coming. He will abandon the sheep because they don't belong to him, and he isn't their shepherd. And so the wolf attacks him and scatters the flock. The hired hand runs away because he is working only for the money and doesn't really care about the sheep. Now, here we see Jesus saying, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and they know me. In other words, the shepherd is going to put himself in danger. The shepherd is personally invested in the sheep, okay? Not like the hired hand who's being paid to take care of the sheep, okay? And if anybody knows, if you own your own business or you got a project or something that you're wanting to sell and fix up, you have a personal investment in that product, okay? So you're going to want the very best, okay, in order to get the highest price for that. I want to tell you this morning, it is the same way with the shepherd. There's a personal interest in there. He's going to make sure those sheep are fed. By the way, did you know that when sheep eat, that they eat, if you let them, they will eat all the way down to the roots of the pasture. And so that's why the shepherd has to lead them, not push them, okay? Notice that the shepherd doesn't push. He or she always leads the sheep to other pastures because he knows that if the sheep eat all the way to the ground, it's not going to be any good for the next one that comes along, let alone his sheep. So he leads them somewhere else because they eat all the way to the ground. So the shepherd will put himself into danger because he has a personal interest in it, okay? He is invested in that flock. Whether he bought it out of his own money or bartered or traded, the point is he knows he wants the best he can get for that wool, or if he decides to sell a lamb for lamb chops, or if he decides to sell a sheep for someone to eat. They do eat them, you know, okay? Some of it's pretty disgusting from what I've read. But anyway, that's another sermon, another story. But the point I'm trying to make this morning is the shepherd is involved personally. And so Jesus is saying, I am the good shepherd. I know my own sheep, and they know me. And Jesus is saying, I want a relationship with you. You are the sheep. The Bible tells us we are like sheep that have gone astray. Did you know that if you leave a sheep alone or in a group, they will just continue to hang out together? As I said, eat the grass to the bottom, and then they'll move somewhere else. But they don't pay attention. They're not always paying attention to what's going on around them, even though they have those big old eyes, those bug eyes, in their head there, okay? They're not always paying attention, so the shepherd is always watching out for them. So the idea here is that the sheep doesn't know what's best for them. So the shepherd will lead them other places and do that. And the shepherd wants a relationship with them. Here, did you know that the sheep can recognize their shepherd's voice? Well, it's true, okay? They will not respond to any other voice that's not the shepherd's. They have heard the shepherd's voice often enough that they instantly recognize it. But if they leave the flock and go out into the woods, then they are in great danger. And as I was saying, sometimes sheep, they just wander off. They just follow their nose. They're following their belly, just wandering off in different pastures, not paying attention to what's going on. Till finally they find themselves in danger. They're separated from the flock, okay? But they hear the sound of the shepherd's voice calling from afar, and they will go to the shepherd, okay? They will follow the shepherd while the sheep... Even when there's a flock of one shepherd here and another flock here, maybe at a watering hole, or they're putting the sheep up for the night. Sometimes they'll put them in the same enclave. Sometimes they'll put them in a cave or something like that to keep the sheep safe. The idea is that when the shepherd starts calling, okay, the one shepherd will be over here and the other shepherd will be over here. And when they start calling the shepherd, the sheep hear the voice of the shepherd, and they go immediately to that shepherd, and that's how they separate them. The shepherd doesn't have to do that, okay? And so let me paint another picture also here. When Jesus said, I am the gate, okay? All right, well, I want to give you a picture here, what they used back then. A lot of times a shepherd would use a shepherd pin, and he would take these stones and he would pile them up, okay, into almost a complete circle, except for just one doorway. There was no emergency exit, okay? There's no way the sheep could go out the back door, just one exit, okay? And so the shepherd, him or someone else, would build these pins, okay? And when it came time to nighttime, okay, the shepherd didn't leave the sheep. He or she was always there. And so what happened was he would get them in this pin. Sometimes the shepherd, if he had the opportunity around him, he would put thorns or some sort of thistle, something on the top of it, so that way it would discourage the wild animals from trying to jump over the gate, okay? All right, thus Jesus saying the thief and the robber destroy, they're the ones that jump over the gate, okay? But the only way out was to go through that one door. And guess who blocked the door? The shepherd. The shepherd would lay down and sleep there to protect the sheep. Nothing was coming in and nothing was going out, because the shepherd was laying down his life for his own sheep, okay? And this is what we're getting a picture of what Jesus is telling us. And so the shepherd, even though a sheep goes astray, the shepherd will call out, okay? Because believe it or not, sheep want to be led, and the shepherd is there to do it. And let me tell you something, folks. There's so much similarity between you and I and a sheep, okay? Because sometimes have we not wandered off on our own, pursuing our own interests and giving into temptation, and then realize, wait a minute, how did I end up here? Okay, I need direction. I need to find my way back, because we need to be led, just like Jesus is telling us. Okay, on a guide on a tour bus that was traveling through Israel's countryside. Israel's on the other side of the world there, okay? It's what they call the Holy Land, okay? And this is where Jesus lived at the time, okay? So they have lots of tours over there. So there was a guide on a tour bus that was traveling through Israel's countryside, and the crowd was engaged as the tour guide was explaining the history and the scenery and the lifestyle all around them. Well, he had an opportunity to tell them about the sheep and the shepherd and their relationship. So in his description, as I said, he included a heartwarming portrayal of the ancient shepherd and sheep relationship. So he told them how the shepherd builds a relationship with his sheep and how he feeds them and gently cares for them. And he pointed out that the shepherd does not drive the sheep, okay, but he leads them, all right? And the shepherd does not need to be harsh with them, because the sheep know his voice, hear his voice and follow it. Well, suddenly the guide realized that he had lost his audience. They all were staring at the window because what they were seeing was a guy that was chasing a flock of sheep. Here, the guy was just saying that the shepherd leads him, and then there's this guy out there chasing him, all right? So the guy that was chasing the sheep, he was out there throwing sticks and rocks at the sheep and whacking them with sticks, and he was even sicking a sheepdog on them. The sheep chasing man really took away from the image the guide had just painted. So the guide is like overcome with emotion, and he jumps off the bus. It's like, man, wait a minute. What are you doing? Do you realize what you've done to me? He asked. I was spinning this charming story about the gentle way of a shepherd takes care of his sheep, and here you are mistreating the sheep, hazing them, and assaulting the sheep. What is going on? Well, a bewildered look froze upon the face of the sheep chaser. And then he finally said, man, you've got it all wrong. I'm not a shepherd, I'm a butcher. A butcher does not care about the sheep. Only the shepherd does. So when Jesus was sharing this illustration about the shepherd and the sheep, there were religious leaders around that day, and I know you've heard of the description of them. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, they were the religious leaders of the day. They were the pastors of the local congregation. They were the bishops, the higher ups in the church hierarchy, and they were, as I said, the teachers and pastors of the day, and they would lead people through the Scripture and teach them. Okay, but they were the ones that were leading the sheep astray in some of the teachings that they were teaching. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And Jesus confronted them quite often. And so just like in Jesus' day, all right, sometimes, and no matter, or depending where you go, you can see it on TV or elsewhere, sometimes there are bad shepherds. They're leading the people astray. They're teaching false doctrine, okay? And because of that, they always put themselves first and their needs ahead of the congregation or the sheep flock, if I can put it that way. And so when the first signs of trouble show up, the bad shepherd or even the hired hand takes off because guess what? They have nothing invested. Perhaps maybe even today, you've been following the wrong shepherd, just like in Jesus' day. Maybe you've wandered off like that one lonely sheep has wandered off. The relationship you've had that led you to a life of love, that you thought was going to lead to a life of love and security, you find yourself wanting. The true shepherd wants you to come to him. Maybe the shepherd you've been following has led you down the path of alienation and discouragement. So when the tough got going and when the trouble set in, the shepherd, the bad shepherd, maybe the hired hand, the person, whoever you were following, got up and left, and now you find yourself vulnerable. You're not sure who to follow, and it's very frightening. You yell at the shepherd, "Where are you? I need you." But you only hear silence. You don't hear the shepherd's voice. But I want to tell you this morning, the true shepherd knows his sheep, and they know his voice, and Jesus is the shepherd you're looking for. He wants you to be a part of his flock, and where he wants you to be safe and secure and to have peace of mind. And guess what? He desires a relationship with you, and he's invested it all out for you because he proved it on the cross and then rose again on the third day. There was a man in Australia who was arrested for stealing sheep, but he claimed that the sheep that was the one that he was being accused of, claimed that that sheep was one of his own and it had been missing for many days. And when the case went to court, the judge was puzzled and not knowing how to decide the matter. But at last, he asked the sheep to be brought into the courtroom. Then he ordered the plaintiff to step outside of the courtroom and call the animal. So when the plaintiff made the call, the sheep made no response except to raise its head and look frightened. Then the judge instructed the defendant to go to the courtyard and call the sheep. When the accused man began to make his distinctive call, the sheep bounded toward the door. It was obvious that he recognized the familiar voice of his master. "His sheep knows him," said the judge. "Case dismissed." And I ask you this morning, do you know the shepherd? Do you know his voice? You can. He's waiting. You can know him this very minute. Maybe you're the individual who has lived life burning the candle at both ends and in the middle, only to find that the shepherd you have followed has left you high and dry. You feel used and abused, and now life seems to be fleeting. You call out to your shepherd and you say, "Where are you? I need you." But the shepherd is nowhere to be found. The hired hand is nowhere to be found. You find yourself that you're scrawny from feeding on the rubbish grasslands of this world. You're thirsty, even though you drink. You cannot satisfy the thirst that is deep within your soul. Where is your shepherd? Where is the hired hand? You've been left high and dry. But I want to tell you this morning, the true shepherd, Jesus, is calling your name. He sees that you're in need of a true shepherd. He will lead you to peaceful green pastures where it's lush, and you will not only grow fat on the land, but it will nourish you and nourish you for eternity. And he will make sure that you eat well, and he will let you drink from his well, this well of living water where you will be satisfied. And I ask you this morning, are you ready to follow him? Are you ready to leave the old shepherd? Are you ready to leave the hired hand and follow the one true voice, the one that you've always been looking for? Or maybe you're the one who thought you knew the true shepherd's voice. Listen to me this morning. Maybe you're the one that you thought you knew the true shepherd's voice, only to find that it has been drowned out by your own self-interest. You have let your spirit of self-will go ahead of the true shepherd. Your spirit of self-independence, and you've gone ahead of the shepherd. You're not being led anymore. You're doing your own thing, and now you find yourself in the wilderness. You find yourself on the edge of a cliff. And because you're on that edge of the cliff, the wolves, the predators are closing in fast. And you ask yourself, what do I do? How did I get here? But I want to give you some good news this morning. In Luke chapter 15, verses 3 through 7, again, Jesus speaking. Jesus told him this story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go search for the one that is lost until it's found? And when he has found it, will he joyfully carry it home on his shoulders? When he arrives, he will call all together his friends and neighbors and saying, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." In the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over the 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away at all. Are you that lost sheep this morning? Have you been wondering? Have you been wanting to come back and not sure what to do? Well, I want to tell you this morning, the shepherd, the true shepherd is calling your name and wants you to be a part of that flock. God is looking for you. You're that lost sheep on the cliff. He is chasing the wolves away, and he wants you to come home. And I ask and I close with this. Will you come home? Will